When you think about games with great stories, you think about long games, The Witcher 3, The Last of Us, Mass Effect, and some of the other games that require a decent chunk of your life, of your time in order to complete. But what if I told you there's some really good single-player experiences in gaming that only take a couple hours? What is up, everybody? Chaos here. Today, we are going to be looking at 15 great single-player games that you can finish in probably 4 hours or less. Now, by going through this list, you could greatly expand your checklist of completed games without sacrificing too much of your precious time. If that's what's important to you, this video will probably serve you well. Drop a like, make sure you're subscribed, and the first one up is a game called Firewatch. Now, it's beautiful, and that has become one of the main games you hear about when people talk about video games as an art form. It's a first-person adventure game, and as you playing as a fire lookout in a national park in Wyoming in the late 80s. You explore the area, you keep a lookout for fire, for danger. You start to learn more about the history of the forest and people who ventured through it before you. It is a beautiful, slightly creepy game, and while there isn't a lot of active gameplay, it's a cool experience. It's more about the story and the world than the moment-to-moment gameplay, which I'm okay with. It's a solid game that I think unfairly gets written off as a walking simulator. Plus, you can finish it in about 4 hours. Donut County. No, this is not a Cooking Mama spinoff. Donut County is an indie game released in late 2018 and has since been ported to every platform possible. You play as a hole in the ground, and the point of the game is to zip around various levels and try to consume everything on the map. Now, if you've ever played the Katamari games on PS2, Donut County is basically that, but backwards. And there's something satisfying about it. I know, it's weird. The whole thing can be finished in just about 2 hours, so it's worth downloading just to see the gameplay if it clicks with you. It's fun. I'll just leave it at that. It's fun. VVV. That is 6 V's for you. Now, despite having a very annoying name to say out loud, it's a fantastic puzzle platformer where you only have to press 3 buttons. The left arrow, the right arrow, and you guessed it, the V key. You play as a spaceman who has to run around a bunch of weird structures in the middle of space and attempt to find and rescue your crewmates instead of jumping over obstacles. The V button inverts gravity, but only for you. So it creates this very unique form of 2D platforming that I've honestly never seen in another game. Now, ironically, this was one of the few good games to come out of the Ouya. Who remembers that console? But it's probably best you get it on Steam or Switch. If you actually bought the Ouya, you probably don't have it. Hotline Miami. You probably heard of this one. It's a game that generated a good amount of controversy when it came out due to its extremely graphic violence and mature subject matter, but the gameplay itself was pretty good. The art style was really cool. It had a good vibe to it. The story's a little hard to explain quickly, but basically, you're carrying out a number of crazy violent hit jobs and heists, but with how fast-paced it is, one mistake can mean instant death, and your entire experience is based around trial and error. Now, Hotline Miami is super addicting, and you'll likely play it over and over again, which is very possible since the main story will only take you about 4 hours to finish, and less once you get the hang of the gameplay. Interestingly, the sequel is almost double the length, but the original is actually probably the better game. Journey. Released in 2012, it's an adventure game, shocker, that took people by surprise. This was one of the first times a really experimental video game got mainstream attention, but I think it was deserved. You play as an unnamed character venturing through the desert on the way to a mountain way off in the distance. Now, along your journey, you'll be treated to some beautiful music, audio cues. You'll find other players who are venturing towards the same location. And when you describe Journey, it doesn't sound like anything special, but if you experience it yourself, it's kind of indescribable. 10 years later, it holds up. Time Crisis, the series. Now, it's cheating, but I'm going to put the entire Time Crisis franchise on the list because I think they're all worthy of a shout. Okay, somehow you didn't know, Time Crisis is a rail shooter. Started back in '95, quickly became one of the most successful arcade franchises in the world. There was a bunch of sequels, there were spin-offs, they came to the arcades, they came to home consoles. Pretty much all of them could be finished in under an hour, and they were addicting. The cover system makes the combat unique, and since the whole game is based around speed, it's endlessly replayable because you're constantly trying to one-up your last time. And personally, I think Time Crisis 2 is the best in the series, but I know a lot of you probably grew up with 3 and 4, so if you are or were an arcade enjoyer, let me know in the comments which Time Crisis was your favorite. Stray. I know, it just came out. Recent release ended up being way more popular than most people thought. It's a cat simulator. Yes, there's some objectives and a loose story going on in the background, but most people just think of it as a cat simulator, and I'm okay with that. It's a super relaxing game, and the gameplay isn't just going to be found in any other game on the market. It can be finished in about 4 hours, so it's totally doable in a single sitting and short enough to warrant playing it over and over again. Even if you didn't think you were going to like Stray, go be a cat. TMNT Shredder's Revenge, released just a couple months ago. It's a throwback to the classic Ninja Turtle arcade beat-em-ups, and it is effective. It's awesome. The visuals are nostalgic, the soundtrack absolutely slaps, and the gameplay is a perfect evolution of the classic games from the 90s. As for the story, it's your standard heroes versus villains setup that most beat-em-up games have, and you can finish the whole thing in about 2.5 hours, but that is not the point. Shredder's Revenge is meant to be played over and over again, just like the classic arcade titles. You play against your own high score, you play against your own personal record, and it's satisfying, plus it's co-op, and it has crossplay. The game is way better than I expected it to be, and it gets a huge recommendation from us, and me, and Team Chaos. Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes. Now, this game rightfully got flack when it came out because of the price tag. It's a nice bite-sized version of MGS5, and the story, while brief, is pretty interesting. It can be finished in a couple of hours. It only features a few gameplay sections, but these areas are pretty awesome, and they really effectively set up the mechanics and style of MGS5 The Phantom Pain. Like I said, a lot of people were upset about Ground Zeroes. I played it not too long ago because it came with a $40 price tag, that's steep. But when you get it for around $5, it's worth a pickup. And think of it as a plot-relevant demo for Phantom Pain. Resident Evil 3, the remake. Now, Resident Evil games are kind of made to be played multiple times, right? You play through it once, you learn everything, you get some new gear for your next attempt. Before you know it, you're running through the entirety of RE4 or RE3, whatever, in less than 2 hours. Resident Evil games usually take a decent amount of time the first time you go through them, but once you get better, RE3, the remake for a couple years ago, started out pretty quickly, only got shorter with each run. A first-time run of the RE3 remake will take you about 6 hours, probably less if you're familiar with the franchise's gameplay. Now, some people criticize the remake for the shorter runtime, but I think it works with the game. If you get good at it, you can probably beat it in under 4 hours. All the 2D Sonic games. I'm cheating again, but I'm pretty sure every single 2D Sonic game can be finished in less than 3 hours. You guys can fact check me. These classic 2D platformers were all about trial and error, memorization, and running really fast as you zip through the stages without slowing down. The environments, they were varied. Soundtracks were great. Boss fights were surprisingly engaging and deep despite the controls being so simple. Sonic may be a meme now, but not in the 2D era. It was a golden age. There's a reason why the character got so popular. Who doesn't enjoy running through a whole Sonic game and immediately starting over again from stage 1 because you want to beat your previous time? Just saying. Sonic died the moment I stopped caring about how fast I was going. The Binding of Isaac. This is one of the most famous indie games of all time. It's easy to see why. It's a roguelike twin-stick shooter that's also an RPG dungeon crawler. It's hard to think of a game that blends so many genres as effortlessly as Isaac does, but it does. It's a very high spot today. It's cool. I think it takes you around half an hour, maybe give or take 10 minutes. The more times you beat the game, the longer your future runs will be as you unlock more and more of the game's potential. But even when the game is at its longest, a full run will take you less than an hour. It's extremely good, it's extremely addicting, and you'll play hundreds of times without ever getting bored. Titanfall 2. One of the best FPS campaigns of all time. I said it. It blew everybody away. Tight riding, fascinating world, absolutely incredible gameplay. Shooting was tight and responsive. Movement options, engaging, sprint, slide, double jump, run on walls, everything was great. Made every level your playground. You could blast through entire levels with never touching the ground like some super assassin, or you could treat it like a traditional FPS game, blast away everybody in your path. Everything about the campaign was fantastic, and you can finish it in 2 to 3 hours. Limbo. This is one of the most iconic indie games of all time. Released 12 years ago, made a name for itself with its dark art style and its fascinating world. Seems like a standard 2D platformer at first, but later adds puzzles, you have to solve them, you have to explore. The darkness it's interesting, and the presentation is amazing. It'll take you about 4 hours, and there's plenty of little secrets for you to hunt after your first run, so give it a download, and if someone or somehow it passed you by all these years you never played it, go give it a try. It doesn't take up a lot of room. And at number 1 today, Portal. When you think of iconic Valve games, you think of TF2, Half-Life, Counter-Strike, but sitting underneath them is Portal, which is a near-perfect video game. First-person puzzler, features very interesting gameplay mechanics, and a visual style that's just, let's call it, unique. Soundtrack, awesome. Story, awesome. GLaDOS is an amazing villain, and the way it seemingly innocently is a puzzle game, gradually getting darker and more intricate, is perfect. It's easily one of the best puzzle games ever made, and I think it deserves far more respect than it gets. Plus, I think it takes you about 3 hours to finish, so you can go through it again and again. There you go. Let me know one game that's short that I didn't put on this list, and I'll see you soon.